Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from RAU'S IAS. Do not forget to subscribe to our Telegram channel for all the updates and materials. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services Examination. Today we are going to take up Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 11th of May 2021. The articles which we are going to discuss today have been displayed on the screen, and let us now begin the discussion. Now all of us understand the importance of optional subject in overall scheme of UPSC Civil Services Examination. And if you're confused about which optional subject to choose, how to find the best teachers and academic support for your optional papers, and above all, how to prepare for the same during these difficult times, RAU'S IAS has best solution for your optional subject related problems. We are conducting optional orientation sessions on 22nd and 29th of May 2021, in which you can learn from the RAU'S IAS teachers about how to prepare for the optional subjects and how are we going to help you in scoring your best in the mains examination. The optional batches are starting from 4th of June and 5th of July 2021 via live online classes. Consider this as a call to all of those who wish to completely cover the optional subject by December 2021. This will ensure timely coverage of optional subject, and then you can focus your attention completely on prelims from January or February 2022 and keep revising the optional subject till you appear for the mains examination. RAU'S IAS is offering guidance for political science, public administration, history, sociology, geography, economics and psychology from Delhi, Jaipur and Bangalore centers. In the description of the video, there is a link which you can use to register yourself for the orientation for the respective optional subject session. We at RAU'S IAS are committed to give you the best guidance and academic support to excel in civil services examination. Join the orientation and kickstart your mains optional subject preparation from a team of best teachers in the arena. Let us now begin the discussion. So the first article which we have taken up is a lead article on page number 6, Decoding Inequality in a Digital World. This article has been written by Ms. Ritika Khera, who is also a professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. And if we have to say a one-line summary of this article, it would be the government is laying too much emphasis on digitalization of health and educational services. But if you look at the underlying situation, but if you look at the basics of health and education in our country, especially the health, there are so many issues which are plaguing our health sector that this digitalization, like providing for COVID app, Arogya Setu, is not going to go a long way in providing any meaningful relief to the citizens of our country. And so that is why the government needs to work on these 6 to 7 major factors. This is important because under GS paper 2, you have a line of the syllabus which says issues relating to development and management of social sector, services relating to health, education and human resources. And in the economic survey, the latest economic survey, we have a chapter which has in detail discussed about the major challenges plaguing the health sector in our country. And so that is what we are going to focus upon currently. And we will see an important term which has been used by the economic survey known as saliency bias, and how the priorities of the government of India are misplaced because the tide has turned in our country, and now the increasing burden is from non-communicable lifestyle diseases, but Indian government still continues to focus upon communicable diseases, the share of whom have reduced a lot except for 2020 and 21, which is an exceptional year. So we all know that recent COVID-19 pandemic has emphasized the importance of the healthcare sector and its linkage with other key sectors of the economy. And we know that health of a nation depends critically on its citizens having access to an equitable, affordable and accountable healthcare system. Better health is directly reflected in the better economic growth of a country through labor productivity, declined economic burden of illness. So for example, a World Health Organization report has said that increasing life expectancy from 50 to 70 years could raise the economic growth by 1.4 percentage points per year. So these are just the economic reasons for improving the health of the economy. Of course, because this is an economic survey. But the better health of each and every individual is an end in itself and not a means to achieve something. And so A whole chapter of economic survey is dedicated to current state of affairs of India's healthcare, and it has highlighted the current issues which are plaguing India's healthcare system. And let us understand them one by one. First and foremost is, of course, India's health outcomes are very poor. As you can see, despite improvements in maternal mortality and infant mortality rate, India still needs to improve significantly on these matrices. Countries such as China, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Cambodia have improved much more in the same period of time than India. And these are just few of the indicators which we have taken. Then, India is still marred by the fact that the access to the health services and its utilization is very low in India. So hospitalization rates in India are 3 to 4%, which are among the lowest in the world. Now the same statistics for a middle income country is about 8 to 9%, and for OECD countries it is about 15 to 17%. The India is observing very high out of pocket expenditures. And as you can see in the figure, India has one of the highest levels of out of pocket expenditure in the world. If you compare, India is placed right beside Bangladesh, whereas other countries which are emerging economies, for example China and Thailand, there the amount of money which people have to shell out for hospitalization and other medical purposes is very low, and that is mainly because of low budgetary allocations for healthcare, or in other words, low public spending in health systems. We know that health is a state subject in India, and if you look at India's overall state-wise distribution of spending on healthcare, it varies drastically, and so there is a vast amount of disparity in the overall spending across India, and so that is reflected in the out-of-pocket expenditure of people belonging to various states as well. So as you can see on your screen, this graph denotes on y-axis the out-of-pocket expenditure and on the x-axis per capita state health expenditure. And so if you see, the states like Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram spend a lot of amount on health, and so that is why the out-of-pocket expenditure in these states are very low. Then we have a problem of very low human resource for health, because health status of any country crucially depends on the available health infrastructure in general and human resource for health in particular. And again, just like low budgetary allocation for healthcare is dependent on the state efforts, the low human resource for health has also a state bias in it. And so the diagram which you see on your screen shows that only Kerala is a state which has adequate amount of human resource for health. Rest each and every state can be categorized into less than adequate density and less than minimum density, and most of the states in India have less than minimum density of human resource in our country. And so this also, being a state subject, has a disparity which can be explained from the point of view of state efforts. And then finally, we have a problem of unregulated private sector in healthcare, which is marked by high market failure. Now, private healthcare is important because while the share of public institutions has increased both in the number of hospitals as well as number of outpatient cares, the private sector dominates in total healthcare provision in India. And around 74% of outpatient care and 65% of overall hospitalization care is being provided through the private sector in urban India. And if you compare the cost of treatment between public and private sector for the same kind of disease, as you can see on the screen, there is a vast difference. And if you plot the same data on a state-wise and a city-wise manner, there is also a stark difference. And so that is why there is a need for a regulation. So these are the major issues plaguing our health sector. And so what is a saliency bias? Now, saliency bias is the bias of the policymakers to design the future course of action based on a recent phenomena. And so recent phenomena, which is a communicable disease, and the pandemic of this level is unlikely to strike within few years or maybe decades. And if we are able to address these issues highlighted in the economic survey, we will be better prepared to handle even these kinds of pandemic. But as the country is going through demographic transitions, there are few trends which are clearly visible, and that is the proportion of communicable and non-communicable diseases are changing in our society. So what you see on the screen is a percentage of all deaths plotted against the number of years. And so this line in the red is the number of deaths caused due to communicable maternal, neonatal and nutritional diseases. And this line in black color or dark brown color shows the number of deaths caused due to non-communicable diseases, and you can see by 2020 this forms the major share of overall deaths. And so the focus of health system of India needs to focus on non-communicable diseases, because if you leave 2020 aside, this is going to cause around 60% of overall deaths in India in future, and this is increasing. And if you break down the deaths caused due to each and every disease, if you look in 2019, the number one killer was heart disease. That has retained its position of number one. But in 2009, the disease which killed most number of people after heart disease was diarrheal disease, which is related to sanitation and infection, which is kind of communicable, has dropped down to the fourth number. Similarly, neonatal disorders have dropped down to fifth level, whereas COPD and deaths due to stroke have risen to 2, 3. So if you look, all top 3 killers are non-communicable in nature. And so that is why the economic survey lays very high emphasis on increasing public spending on health from 1% to at least 2.5% of the GDP. Increasing government spending on health has direct impact on life expectancy. And so these dots which you see on your screen are countries. And so higher the public expenditure, higher is the expectancy rate. And India is placed over here. Similarly, using the data, they also show that increasing public spending on health has negative correlation with maternal mortality rate. Higher the public spending on health, lower will be the mortality rate. So these are the major challenges on which the government of India should work upon. And when you are writing an answer related to health in GS paper 2, or even you are writing an essay, if you focus on these 6 to 7 points, those are sufficient to stretch your answer either to 250 words and even into 1200 words essay. Let us now move on to the next news. So the two news items appear on page number 6 and page number 13 respectively. On the edge as a form of column on page number 6, and over 300 Palestinians hurt in Jerusalem holy site clash appears on page number 13. So Israel police has fired a lot of tear gases, stun grenades and rubber bullets on stone throwing Palestinians at a flashpoint in Jerusalem's holy site. And for all those people who read the newspapers regularly, must have encountered the news related to Israel and Palestine conflict at least once every week. But since the problem is so complicated that the people who are the beginners into the preparation, the new aspirants, do not have a clear-cut understanding into the full historical context of Israel and Palestine dispute. And to be able to understand the progression appearing in the newspaper every day, you have to have a clear-cut idea as to what is the underlying cause, and which is what we are going to understand today. We are going to understand the historical context which has led to one of the world's most long-lasting and violent disputes among two nation groups. But not just that, even for the prelims examination, the map locations related to the Middle East and Israel-Palestinian conflict is very, very important. For example, in 2015 UPSC IAS, the area known as Golan Heights sometimes appears in the news in the context of the events related to, and which one of the following countries of Southwest Asia do not open to the Mediterranean Sea? And so the answer of both these questions you will get through the discussion we are going to have now. And so in order to be able to understand what is happening right now, we'll have to go back in history to the time when there was extreme persecution of Jews, which resulted in the migration of Jews from Europe and various other parts of the world to Palestine, which led to the passage of UN resolution, which were followed by two important wars which were fought by Israel and Arabian countries, 1948 Arab-Israel War and Israel's Six-Day War. So now the current map of Israel and Palestine, which you see on Google Map or on World Map today, is something which did not exist 100 years ago. Because 100 years ago, there were very few Jews who lived in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. Most of them had already migrated to various European cities and countries. But the problem was that wherever Jews went, they had to face extreme persecution both from Muslims as well as from Christians. And hence a movement emerged among Jews living in European countries which took up the cause of persecution and talked about escaping this persecution. It actively talked about creation of a state solely or only meant for Jews. And this particular movement came to be known as Zionist movement. So basically Jews were persecuted in European countries. They decided they will gather, unite and move to location on earth where they will establish their own state which will be just for them. And the place which was identified by them was Palestine. And so once it was decided that Palestine will be the place where they will set up their own country, they started to migrate. But the question arises, how could this migration take place? Now they could migrate because of special situation which was created as a result of World War I. If you know the context of World War I, you know that as a result of it, the Ottoman Empire, which controlled the most of the region of the Middle East, disintegrated as a result of World War I. And as the settlement of World War I, the administration of the Palestinian region was handed over to the British people. And you can see the Palestine in the red color marked over here, and you can see that under British, French and Russian protection. And this particular arrangement where British, French and Russian governments decided to trifurcate the whole region among themselves is known as Sykes-Picot Agreement. So two things happened simultaneously in favor of Jews. The disintegration of Ottoman Empire, an empire which claimed to be the protector of the Muslims. The existence of such an empire would have prevented the inflow of Jews to this particular region because it was controlled by a very, very powerful Ottoman Empire which disintegrated in 1915 to 16. And at the same time, the territory Palestine, which was identified under the Zionist movement will be the place where all the Jews will migrate, fell under the British occupation, and Britishers since the beginning were quite sympathetic to the cause of the Jews' protection and their persecution. But as soon as the World War ended, and a new set of governments started to form in Europe, another factor was added into the migration or giving a big boost to the migration of Jews from Europe to the Palestine, which was emergence of a lot of fascist governments across Europe. One of them you know is Hitler, another one was Mussolini, and so what you have across Europe is wide level of persecution which extended well beyond Germany. And so as more and more fascist and anti-Jews government rose up in Europe, the persecution of Jews reached unprecedented level not even seen during medieval times. And this resulted into the kind of migration which was never seen by Jews in the history. So now, starting with Zionist movement as reason number 2, disintegration of Ottoman Empire and occupation of Palestine by Britishers, and third is that now you have fascist regime which were actively persecuting Jews, which was unseen before. And so as a combined result of all these factors, the more and more number of Jews started arriving in a very, very small territory of Palestine, which was earlier mainly populated by Arab Muslims. And so what you have till 1947 is that this Palestinian territory is just receiving more and more number of Jews flowing in from Germany, from Sweden, from France, and from various other places in Europe, and they are just arriving and making up their own homes inside Palestine because this particular territory is controlled by British. They are allowing the people to come in. But by the time 1947 and 1948 came, a massive alarm was raised by local Arabs because now they were concerned about the increasing population of Jews, and they started an armed militant movement against the in-migrants or the Jews. And so this of course resulted in a retaliation from Jewish side, and this led to a lot of violence in the one particular year from 1947 to 48. But now it is 1947-48 and World War II has already ended, and now the Britishers had made up their mind to vacate the Middle East, including the Palestinian region. And so they decided to establish a proper state which the world would recognize as Israel, or nation state for Jewish people. And hence United Nations Security Council passed a resolution which voted to split the earlier Palestinian region into 3 states. One Arab state, another one Jewish state, and the third one would be the Jerusalem city. And so this UN resolution was passed in 1947, and this resolution is known by the name of UN Resolution number 181. And so now is the time to understand how the map of Palestine changed after this particular resolution. So you can clearly see that there are 3 colors in this map. Blue denotes the Jewish regions, pinkish orange color denotes the Arab regions, and the yellow one is international city of Jerusalem. So this was the condition starting 1948. And so this was the first time when the boundaries were actually drawn in the state of Palestine. So earlier what you had was complete Palestine owned and possessed and populated by Arabs. But after the resolution, what you have is a trifurcation of the same state into three parts. You can see clearly that Jews were given a lot of territory and Arabs were made limited to just the orangish areas. And so this was the first time when the Jews got the legal right, recognition from across the world, to make up their own home state or home nation. So as you can totally understand, it's quite commonsensical what would have been the reception of this UN resolution. It was wholeheartedly accepted by Jews because since 100 years there was a demand among the Jews for their own home state, which they finally got through UN resolution number 181. But as far as Arabs are concerned, they completely rejected the UN resolution. It's not difficult to think why the response was such, because the earlier territory which completely belonged to them, 50%, more than 50% of that was given to Jews. And so they not only rejected the UN resolution, but at the same time they said that any further talks would not be entertained and we are going to fight it back and take it away from the Jews. And so here now what you have is genesis of one of the world's most cluttered and disputed territories. When the Arabs rejected the United Nations resolution, they also promised with each other that they are going to win back the areas which have been given to the Jews, which resulted in a lot of wars. But we are going to keep ourselves limited to 1948 Arab-Israel war and Israel's Six-Day War, because these are the two wars which have resulted into drastic changes in the map of the Israel and Palestine, and these are the locations which are frequently asked in UPSC Prelims examination. And through this discussion you will understand the importance of each and every territory. So in 1948, following the declaration of the State of Israel, the group of Arab nations known as Arab League decided to intervene on behalf of their Palestinian brothers by ordering their troops and military to marching into the areas of Palestine, especially those areas which were given to the Jews. Overall, the war was quite prolonged, but Israel emerged victorious because it not only retained its own mandate, it not only retained the territories which were allocated to it through UN resolution, but it was also able to capture around 60% of the territory which was given to the Arab people. So now after the end of this war, the Jews extended their area of control within Palestinian region. And so for next 10 to 15 years, things remained almost the same until in 1967 when Israel fought Six-Day War with its surrounding neighbors, which was actually started by Israel because Israel had this kind of premonition that the neighboring states are going to attack it. And so Israel started conducting preemptive strikes on Egypt, Syria and Jordan. And the interesting outcome of the war was not just that it defeated the combined armies of Egypt, Syria and Jordan, but Israel also managed to get control over some of the most strategically important points in Egypt, Syria and Jordan, which would then go a long way in defending Israel in future. So for example, it captured completely Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip. It took away Golan Heights, which are located over here, from Syria, and then it took West Bank, which can be seen marked in the blue color over here, and East Jerusalem from Jordan. So before the beginning of the war, Israel was just limited to the area which I am shading in blue color. It did not have Gaza Strip, it did not have Sinai Peninsula, it did not have West Bank, it did not have Syrian region of Golan Heights, which are very, very important strategically to protect Israel from Syria. But after the war ended, the Israel had access to Suez Canal through Sinai Peninsula. It completely controlled West Bank, Gaza Strip and also the Golan Heights. Now of course the current map of Israel does not show Sinai Peninsula as a part of Israel, and so that is because Israel returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt in response to Egypt becoming the first Muslim country to recognize the existence of Israel as a formal state. So that was like a quid pro quo. You recognize us and we'll give back your territory to you. But it has held on, stuck to the other territories even now. It still controls Gaza Strip and West Bank. It still controls most of the Jerusalem. Now, whenever you read the news about Israel and Palestine, this is the one term because of which the news appears, and that is called the settlements of Israeli people in Palestine. So what are these settlements? Of course, the Jewish people are settling in this particular region since more than 80 years now. And so what is this new stuff known as settlements? So settlements are basically civilian establishments for Jews. But they are known as settlements. There is a particular term, settlement, is used only for those colonies which are built on land occupied by Israel after 1967 war. So if you make a house or a home or a colony inside this particular region, there is no trouble. But we know that in 1967, Israel occupied and started controlling the West Bank as well. And so what Israel does is that it comes up with new colony here, expelling the Arabs from that particular region. And this has seen a continuous upswing in past 10 years, especially with the election of Mr. Netanyahu, who has been extremely nationalist in his outlook and approach towards the Arab people. So now this is a clear violation of UN resolution, because the UN resolution limited the Jews only to the region which was allocated to them. But now these Jewish people have started to make their homes inside the Arabian territories as well. And so now what you see on the screen is a gradual transformation of Israel's ethnicity in terms of the occupation. And so the light green color in the dark background shows the continuous reduction in the area populated by Arabs, and you can see a drastic decline after 1960, because then in 1970 onwards Israel's national government started to take up the colonies earlier settled by Arab people, expelled them because they have brute force on the ground, and now they are making up territories, colonies and occupations inside the Palestinian lands. So these settlements have led to a lot of violence in this particular region. So that is the reason number one because of which we hear the news related to Israel and Palestine. Now the reason because of which in last 10 days Israel has appeared in the newspaper is because of the clashes taking place at Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the third holiest site in Islam. And it sits on a plateau which is also the holiest site for Jews, who refer to it as the Temple Mount, because it was the location of biblical temples. Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 AD with only the western wall remains. And the mosque was of course built much later. And so what you have right now, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then you have a wall which is the holiest site for Jews. And in recent years, groups of religious and nationalist Jews escorted by Israeli police have started to visit the compound or this campus in greater numbers, and they have started to hold prayers in defiance of the rules which was signed in 1967. Now Palestinians view the frequent visit by Israelis as an attempt to ignite violence. The Palestinian view is that more and more Israelis will start visiting, and they will eventually take over the control over their one of the holiest mosques across the world, which is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is also one of the only few places still not controlled by the Israeli people. Because this particular location containing both Al-Aqsa Mosque and the wall is under the custody of neighboring country Jordan. The site is open to tourists during certain times, but only Muslims are allowed to pray there, and the western wall is the holiest site where the Jews can pray. And now since the Jewish police has started to visit this particular region, the Palestinians and the Arabs are now increasingly concerned about the increasing control of the Israel on their holiest site. Next news item which we are going to take up appears on page number 7, a national health service in India. And so in this particular article, author discusses the British National Health Service, which is a comprehensive public health service under government administration established by National Health Service Act 1946 in Britain. And he makes up a case for such a service in India also. Apart from that, time to time people have written articles about All India Health Services, just like you have All India Police Services, you have All India Administrative Services, and you have All India Forest Services. And so a lot of people at various times have insisted on a creation of All India Health Services. And so let us quickly discuss the constitutional provisions related to the creation of a new All India Service, and which is dealt with in our constitution under Article 312, which mentions about creating All India Services. And so it states that if Council of States has declared by resolution supported by not less than 2/3 of the members present and voting that it is necessary or expedient in the national interest to create an All India Service, then Parliament may by law provide for the creation of one or more All India Services in common to the Union and States. And such a law will regulate the recruitment and conditions of service of persons appointed to any such service. And so since last 10 to 20 years, there is a growing amount of support, not just with respect to All India Health Services but also with respect to All India Judicial Services. Although it has nothing to do with the National Health Service, which is a kind of a scheme run by the British government. But from the perspective of our examination, it is important for us to understand how a new All India service is created. Then this last news which we have taken up appears on page number 8. 3 naval ships bring in medical supplies. So in one of the single largest consignment of emergency medical supplies from abroad, Navy's landing ship tank INS Airawat arrived at the naval dockyard in Visakhapatnam from Singapore with 8 cryogenic oxygen tanks and other critical COVID medical stores. Apart from that, INS Kolkata and INS Trikand have also reached the coast of India. And now UPSC in the past has asked question on defense equipments like these. Which one of the following is best description of INS Astradharani that was in news recently, was asked in 2016. And the right answer is torpedo launch and recovery vessel, which was in news that year. And now since these 3 shipping vessels of Indian Navy have come into news, let us now quickly discuss about each one of them. And this is the only information which you need. So INS Airawat is the 3rd Shardul class amphibious warfare vessel of Indian Navy, whereas INS Kolkata is the lead ship of Kolkata class stealth guided missile destroyers of the Indian Navy, which was completely built at Masgaon Dock Limited, whereas INS Trikand is a Talwar class frigate of Indian Navy, which are stealth guided missile frigates designed and built by Russia for Indian Navy.